US Secretary of State John Kerry is now scheduled to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Berlin next week to look for ways to de-escalate the violence here, but it's unclear whether the US has sufficient weight to pressure the Israelis or whether the Israeli and Palestinian leaders are prepared to cede ground in the search for some kind of solution. John?
All right, Carl, thank you. Diana Boutou is a former legal advisor to the PLO and a Palestinian human rights lawyer. She spoke with us late last night from Haifa, Israel, about the recent unrest and whether Israel is engaging in excessive force or defending itself.
This is not just excessive force, it's beyond excessive force. The Israeli government has issued orders of shoot to kill. In other words, shoot first and ask questions later. And we've seen this play out in a number of the extrajudicial killings that we've seen over the course of the past few weeks. So this has nothing to do whatsoever with self-defense. This has everything to do with Israel wanting to get rid of as many Palestinians as possible. And so all it takes is for lynch mobs, as we've seen them, to start finding out that people are Arab, yelling Arab, Arab, terrorist, terrorist, and then the policy kicks in of shoot first and ask questions later.
But you know there's been a wave of stabbings of Israeli citizens. How would you expect Israel to respond?
I would expect Israel to respond in the way that it should have responded some 50 years ago, which is to recognize that there is a link between occupation and between violence. And the fact that this occupation continues for 50 years, that we've seen generation after generation live under Israeli military rule, we can't simply ignore the occupation. We can't simply pretend that it doesn't exist. It's time for Israel to end this occupation. If we simply look at one side of the equation being violence, we're not getting the full and complete picture. What is happening here is a result of nearly 50 years of military rule and the denial of freedom of Palestinians. It's gotten to the point where Palestinians don't see that there's any future.
I understand your opinion that there's been violence on the Israeli side, but what you described sounds to me like an excuse for the stabbings that have taken place, those stabbings that have killed Israeli citizens.
It's obviously not an excuse whatsoever, but I'm also not responsible for these people. These are individual acts, individual people who are driven for one reason or another to carry out some sort of act of violence. For example, most of the people that we've read about or seen over the course of the past few weeks have been themselves subjected to some form of violence. They've either seen their family members or their best friends be killed, and it is leading them to say, if there isn't a difference between my life or my death, then if I can't live in dignity, then so other people shouldn't either.
Secretary of State John Kerry is due to visit the Middle East. What can the United States do?
Look, I think the problem is that the United States has been the biggest enabler for Israel's military occupation. It has allowed Israel to perpetrate crimes against Palestinians, to maintain a system of apartheid. You simply have to look to last year, where more than 2,000 Palestinians were killed by Israel, including over 500 children. 100,000 homes were demolished by Israel, and these 100,000 homes and buildings, offices, etc., still remain unbuilt 1 year and several months later. So what the United States' role has simply been to allow Israel to do whatever it wants to do. If the United States wants to play a positive role, it can start joining on to the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign. It can start pushing to hold Israel accountable rather than giving Israel carte blanche to do whatever it wants.
There's no sign the United States is going to change its position to defend Israel and be its ally. So what other solutions are there on the table?
We really want to see a better life for people here. We'll start pushing for Israel to finally allow Palestinians to live in the freedom and dignity that they deserve. And this will be done by pushing for boycotts against Israel, pushing for sanctions against Israel, pushing to divest from Israel, and pushing to hold Israel accountable under international law, and pushing for Israel's isolation. Apart from that, I don't see that anything else is going to happen that is going to be positive.
Diane Boutou, we appreciate you being on the program. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Shahar Azani is the executive director for the Northeast region of Stand With Us, a pro-Israeli advocacy group. He is a former deputy spokesman for Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he is once again in our studio. Shahar, welcome. Good to have you in the program.
I wish only under different circumstances, John.
Where do we start?
Can I say something?
Sure.
Lack of listening to Diana Boutou. lack of compassion for the other side, BDS, building walls between people, not building bridges, the animosity, how difficult would it have been for her to say, it's not okay to stab 78-year-old women. And had she said that, she would have built bridges into the hearts of Israelis, and then we would have seen hope, maybe building between Israelis and Palestinians. It really gave me much sorrow to see the attitude, John.
But you do hear this message loud and clear. The message that she delivers is occupation, the violence is a direct result of occupation.
Well, the truth is that the violence is a direct result of incitement and education. It's a direct result of generations of Palestinians seeing this every day, John. Seeing these images on social media, Mahmoud Abbas's, Abu Mazen's speech saying that the feet of Jews are defiling Temple Mount was aired on official Palestinian TV 19 times in 3 days. So it's a generation that...
How long can you keep people walled off? You know, I mean, it seems to me that at some point, whether they're taught that or whether they're just mad as hell because their house was bulldozed or their family...
So let's sit down for negotiations.
I mean, honestly, isn't there some point at which they're just, this isn't going to work?
Yes.
And have you reached that point?
Prime Minister Netanyahu said today, Abbas, let's sit today, not tomorrow, now. Ramallah and Jerusalem are minutes away from each other. Peace will not come from Stockholm or Geneva. Let's sit together today, no preconditions. And if Abbas chooses to do that, then I can assure you, not only in the interest of Palestinians, but of Israelis, we will see a different reality on the ground.
You know, it strikes me after listening to Diana talk about John Kerry in the United States and having lost faith in the United States, and then listening to Netanyahu talk about how he's lost faith in the United States because it's tried to put this package together with Iran, that neither side thinks the United States is helping them.
It's clear to everyone that the only real player in the field of the Middle East and Israeli Palestinians is the United States of America. And even when we have disagreements, the only enabler, and on that issue even I could agree with Diana, is the United States. And the United States has the power to put the pressure where it should be.
The United States is enabling...
could enable peace between Israel and the Palestinians
it.
if it applies pressure in the right place. Let me explain. We have been talking about settlements when we need to talk about education and incitement. You see, this generation...
settlements in sight?
I'll tell you. This generation is of children who are 10, 12 years away from the Second Intifada, who have not experienced the plights of Israelis and Palestinians only 12 years ago. If we don't want to wake up in 12 years from today with another round of violence with other kids who have not seen the plights of this war, we need to touch on education. Too long have we looked the other way from what's being done on the textbooks and on official TVs, and we are fostering hate within generation after generation. A 13-year-old, James, is stabbing a Jewish 13-year-old boy on a bicycle 15 times.
Yeah.
15 times.
But I ask the question again. You talk about incitement by the Palestinians. Don't settlements incite the Palestinians to violence?
Is there an issue where we have disagreement? Let's sit down and talk. Netanyahu called on every possible stage and told the Palestinians, no preconditions, meet with me. They wouldn't even do that. You know why? Because negotiations require concessions. We are willing to make concessions. They're not.
Shahar Azani, good to see you again. Thank you very much.
Good to be here. Thank you.
The U.S. government said today it is canceling future sales of offshore leases for oil drilling in the Arctic. Last month, Shell announced it would not explore there after disappointing results from a test well.